We were searching for minutes and
I'm still
apparently found
searching
none.
for minutes,
And
so.
still searching.
I think they might have disappeared in the Caribbean.
It's in
Let's hope they didn't fall over.
Well, we probably are going to need minutes this week, right?
Yeah, eventually they will.
I need a pen if someone could lend me one. Thank you.
All right.
Sure, happy to give that up.
We will
Pair of tracks and like
move on to new business.
I need a pen.
ties. And
You can use mine for that purpose.
And it was there 10 years later.
Oh, here's one that's just laying about.
Hear about next year's.
All right,
Quarterly
everybody's
result,
got
or
writing
next
utensils,
quarter's
hopefully.
results.
Yes,
Okay.
sorry about that.
All right, we'll move on to new business, US EPA Brownfields Assessment Grant.
Thank you. I don't have a huge update on that. I will take this as a note to check in with staff or bring staff with me that can give you an update. I didn't add this to the agenda, but I know we have a US Brownfields Assessment Grant, and Colleen Gilson, our Chief Neighborhood Development Officer, is going to take the lead on identifying the sites to use that grant money and project manage that project. So I imagine that Director Holliday or Colleen, Ms. Gilson, will come in to give an update about that in a future meeting.
All right, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? I understand you're not really prepared to address that, but just to infuse the question into the process, are you aware of the brownfield status or not of Deepwater Marina? I mean, I know there's that plume thing, but that might be slightly to the east of that, and there had been talk about years of sanding boat bottoms and the metal or whatever that
I know, my knowledge is limited to basically what the comp plan says, which it reads to me that it was an assumption, it's a brownfield site, and so it was recommended to be green space by the bicentennial plan because that's a great way over a long period of time to clean up a site. I don't know if any environmental analysis has occurred on that site. I do think it would be a good contender for it for the future redevelopment potential of the site if that's an applicable place for the grant. I don't know that either.
that was my only intention, to infuse that
Yeah,
thought.
I'll get smarter on that and ask
Through the
Colleen.
chair, if I could.
Yes.
I was quite involved with that entire scenario with the coal tar incident. There were a number of drillings done. I think there was probably close to 60-plus holes that were drilled. That information was provided to the city, so your record should show that there was certain items found in certain areas. The problem is no conclusion was made as to the source at that point in time. But if you do go any further with that, I would suggest that you look at the records and see. That occurred in 2006, I'm going to say.
Okay.
2006.
The borings you're talking about.
Huh?
The borings.
The borings and the entire thing. At that time, there was a group that wanted to see CERCLA come in and basically create a nightmare. The reality of it is that nobody really could determine what was going on and how it was going on. I will tell you that would be a nightmare if it was CERCLA, because that is Love Canal situation, which was in New York.
What is CERCLA?
CERCLA is the federal government's high-powered EPA group that comes in and says, no development, we have to dig everything up, we have to put it in cans and move it out. And Love Canal was the best example of that, and to this day, nobody's living in Love Canal.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I would say that maybe Love Canal is a little hyperbolic, but it is true that the reason we've got that berm designed into the site of the municipal marina, at least ostensibly, was to keep the material on site, which...
There was an argument with that, too, because they said that it was going underneath the rock base.
Right, but everything changes when you start taking material off-site versus move it around on-site, and that was, so, it all worked out, and, but I think we maybe should leave it to any potential developers for now rather than,
I just look at your previous reports is what I'm saying.
that's an excellent point.
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to be in any in-depth conversations or need to look at those, but part of the future
No.
education opportunities.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Tim.
Aaron, is there a target for the assessment grant for the actual US EPA? Do we know what's going to be assessed?
I don't.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that discussion. We'll keep it on the radar, obviously. Sandusky Action Sports Park.
That one I can talk about. So we are launching a design process for our skate park, and we're what's generally referred to as our skate park. It includes the whole site, including the pump track, and we have a really engaged and active group of stakeholders. A lot of the folks that use it are there every day. A lot of them travel to other cities to go take part in their wheeled sports parks, and so that's the broadened name. Action Sports Park was suggested by a stakeholder to make sure that it's obvious that it will be the idea for the redesign is that it will work for all wheels, all age levels, all levels of expertise and skill. We are having a public meeting. The first design meeting on that will be Thursday, November 17th at 5 p.m., 5 to 6:30. That'll be at Mylander Pavilion down on the Jackson Street Pier. And it's open, public meeting. It'll be an open house format. They're going to do, the design team is going to do some kind of charrettes where they think about the major components that people want to see on the site, different places that people like to go and would like to bring elements to Sandusky, the different percentages of skill levels and how much for beginners and, trying tricks to advanced surface area that takes up. I'm learning all their jargon. I'm like, teach me how to talk about this. So it's really fun experience to get involved in. The project is being led by OHM Advisors. They're landscape architects, project management. They do a lot of recreation planning, and so they are going to really help oversee the whole thing. They're also engineers, so they're doing some geotech. They're doing a survey, and they can look at the context. How do you get to the site? Is there shade and picnic tables and water available? So they'll look at the context of the whole experience of being there. And then their partners are Spone Ranch, which is a 30-year nationally known award-winning skate park design, all-wheeled sports park design company, and they're out of Colorado. And it's been really cool just getting to know them so far, and their portfolio is really beautiful. They've done a bunch of work in Ohio, so they're not just coming out of here out of nowhere. And Vince actually is from the Midwest. I think he's from Iowa. He's our lead.
what was the name of that?
Spone Ranch, it's SPOHN, Spone Ranch is the company. Vince O'Neill is our direct point of contact with them, but obviously they'll be engaging their whole team. He will be on site for the meeting on Thursday, the 17th. So you're all invited if you're hearing folks ask about it, or if you have, kids, grandkids, family members, cousins, uncles, whatever, that skate or BMX bike or ride scooters, please let them know and share. There's also an online survey out right now. You can find that on our Facebook page. There's QR codes on flyers at the skate park. I posted a bunch of flyers yesterday, so we're getting the word out. The first day I sent it out, 16 people answered it, so that the stakeholders are really engaged. So that's, as a planner, it's my favorite when people are really involved in projects.
David.
Aaron, can you elucidate me on the geographical constraints? How is this thing bounded? Is it like Maroose Lease on one side and Sandusky Sailing Club? And I mean, I'm trying to envision how big this site can be and how much can be included. It's
basically the north is bound by the Sandusky Bay Pathway. The west is the...
Where is that line going
that's,
to be?
It's established right along the sailing club. So there's the sailing club basin, and then the Sandusky Bay Pathway along the waterfront right there to the northeast of Washington Street Pier. So that forms the kind of, I guess that's the east line. The map is just flipping in my head. And then the probably eclipse the Salem Club and the Maurice Lease, like you mentioned, and then the Justice Center. And it goes all the way back to the pine trees at the south, where there's a cell tower they have a lease on a space. So it's bigger than the footprint. It's basically that whole grassy area between the parking lot of the Justice Center and the waterfront.
The Justice Center, is that like at the boundary of the existing parking lot on the east side?
Pretty much, yeah. And we planned the Justice Center, because they are going to fence the parking there. It's just modern protocols for security for police and court systems. So we left space for potential right-of-way if we ever needed it in the future to make sure we can continue our street grid if development occurs in the area. I don't know.
You're talking access from Washington Street then?
Yes.
To get back there?
Yes. So we might be considering making sure that we keep that, which would probably need 60 feet, which would not interrupt the existing footprint of the skate park, but we'll need to be mindful of that potential southern boundary and be careful to not encroach on it if possible.
And then access on the other side, or is that envisioned to be an in and out, or would there be a path that you go in one way and go out another way, like a one-way sort of thing, or?
So the bays of parking in between the tennis courts and the Justice Center are staying, and that's the parking that's generally utilized by folks that are going to the wheeled sports park. So that will stay. I know the Meg Street project included kind of a reconfiguration of how you get into the site, that Water Street can extend, Market Street can extend. So assuming that's a development site, then we get our street grid into the site and not some new fangled weird way to get in and out. So we'll be considering how all those plans have aligned and how you get in and out of the site for sure.
I think it has the potential to be a very exciting new area.
Yeah, and my understanding is that the location will stay the same. That's where we're surveying it, that's where we're discussing it. If the soil borings or the plan of what we want to create won't work at that site, then we'll discuss moving it. But from my understanding right now, I don't think that people want it moved. They want to keep it where it is. I mean, waterfront site, I wouldn't give that up if it was me, but if what they want won't work on that site, then we'll look elsewhere.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So obviously, we're already touching on Battery Park. I don't think you can even think about the skate park without thinking about Battery Park. And people are asking, is there anything at all that you can report as far as, are you in negotiations? Is anything happening at all there, or is it everything at a dead halt? There's economic considerations and everything else. What can you say about Battery Park? We do have a master plan for that included in the downtown plan. We're obviously trying to execute the downtown plan. What can you tell us?
The master plan for downtown talked about the connections to the street grid. So all of those things, those components, are what we want to see in a development. Battery Park views being protected,
Okay.
the public access, and my understanding is that they're working hard on a site plan and they want to bring that to life.
And in particular, there's like people running around with their hair on fire because obviously with the new curbing on Meg's, there's no entrance where the Battery Park entrance used to be, and it seems like no one's noticing that the curb does turn in at the end of Water Street per the plan on the, so maybe we should highlight or at least talk about, we don't know what we're going to do exactly, but we do know that the plan calls for the entrance, maybe not even an entrance, maybe more likely a street going along the water through Battery Park, which I think would be a really positive thing.
Absolutely.
Anything else on the Action Sports Park and adjoining areas? Okay. All right. All good discussion. All right. Any other new business that anyone has to bring this morning? All right, we'll move on to old business. Columbus Avenue.
Thank you. I have brought with me the presentation that was delivered to the City Commission, October 24th meeting. So this is the 30% design point of the Columbus Avenue streetscape design process. I also brought you a handout, and feel free to read that later with a magnifying glass. I know the font is small. I just wanted to make sure it fit on one place. But that is it's a list of all the engagement that occurred through the downtown planning process and the streetscape design process to get us to where we are today. In case you're getting questions about that, how and when was the public involved, how were the stakeholders involved, and I'll go over a little bit of that here. So what you're seeing on this first slide is the adopted renderings from the downtown plan. So this is the concept that was adopted by the downtown plan, and that was really fed by those 798 public comments from our online survey, several rounds of stakeholder engagement with our merchants, restaurant owners, business owners, building owners, regional stakeholders, the courthouse, lots of folks involved in these iterative conversations to come up with that vision for Columbus Avenue to be the most vibrant street of the city. It's the center of our downtown retail environment. It is the core of our civic activities in the city. And as we have invested a ton of money into Jackson Street Pier and Shoreline Drive, we've seen how that has enlivened the community and inspired new development and new investment and human activity. And that has drawn some of the center of gravity of our town towards the water. Of course, we're on the water. It's our most beautiful asset. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here. But we don't want it to pull all of our activity down to the water, right? So we have to, the investment in Columbus Avenue helps bring that center of gravity and root it into the center of downtown, which becomes our framework and our spine to extend and connect into the neighborhoods. It will help us make decisions about future streetscapes of downtown because Market Street needs redone and Jackson Street needs redone. And we know a lot of places in the neighborhoods need redone as well. But this is really the civic core of our city. So the overall planning objectives are to make Columbus Avenue our most vibrant street. We're fostering that connection from Shoreline Drive to Jackson Street Pier. So making that connection, making sure people are making that turn to come up into the businesses when they go down to the pier for a concert, for example. We are anchoring that civic and retail core, so foot traffic is the most important thing for restaurant and retail business, especially retail. It's feet on the ground, it's people moving around, not cars. So we have to rebalance that because we have so much of our space dedicated to vehicles at this time. Also, the number two most top things we heard from people during the downtown plan process was wider sidewalks and more places to eat, more outdoor dining. So that's really was driving the concept too. We want to increase that waterfront connection. We want to think about the views, the beauty, transform that experience that you really feel like, wow, you've arrived in Sandusky and you're looking down the corridor and you see the bay and really have that momentous experience on Columbus Avenue. A little bit about the engagement. This is kind of really detailed on the spreadsheet I gave you, but for just the streetscape design process, so after the downtown plan, we embarked on this streetscape design, and we started late April, and we've been working on that until now. We had a site tour and open house, so we invited all of our retailers, merchants, building owners downtown to meet us. We started in Washington Park. We invited commissioners, the courts, the church, the school, everybody that was like their, property is here, their daily activities are here. To start Washington Park, we walked the whole site. We talked about how it's working today, how it's not working today. We came into commission chambers and we had boards of existing conditions and the downtown plan and talked about, what's going to work about that, what's not going to work about that. And then the group our design team made edits. We did a whole round of stakeholder focus group sessions where the city was not involved, so our consultants called everybody so they would be really frank with them because the city wasn't listening, and then they reported back what they heard. We've had a ton of one-on-one project discussions. Then we started with the public outreach, so social media, the Register article. We did an online survey. We did 2 public meeting events where We set up the boards, and I know you know a lot of this because I was giving you updates throughout the process, but we distributed a bunch of information cards to get more survey traffic, and we got 434 responses to that survey, and then they made edits to that. So at every iteration, they made edits to the plan, to the design scheme, and then we had 17 follow-up one-on-one discussions. So I went, I was on folks' patios and in their restaurants when they were closed, and, like shopping this around with big posters, like, here's what's this actually gonna look like when we get to your door. It's not that detailed yet, but it's getting close, like, tell me how that experience, how that works, and have done a ton of outreach there. So that all brought us to this 30% design, which they will now begin civil engineering, and we'll get construction documents to build this thing next year. Overall, some top themes of what we heard. The shade trees are really popular. Right now, the trees we have aren't working well. They are not providing shade. They're not tall enough. They're not thriving. So they're all in the way of the retail signage. They're too short. They're like lollipops right in the way. And what you want is that shade to be higher up. So it's a windbreak in the winter, it's shade in the summer. You can actually see the storefronts and the signage. You can have a really lovely stroll, accompanied with lighting. People were really lighting was really popular discussion throughout the whole project process. Distinctive seating elements, and lots of opportunities to have a seat and watch people or take a rest if you need to sit down to get to places and have a rest. Safe and accessible crosswalks, so increasing the safety and accessibility of the whole streetscape is a huge theme here. And then outdoor dining has continued to be really popular. You're probably not surprised that people also really want to understand the parking, how the parking will change, how downtown parking works overall, how the accessible parking will work. So we will talk a lot about that too. But really, this is our opportunity to create more of a pedestrian-friendly streetscape. Right now, when you're out there walking, there's lots of places to twist your ankle. There's lots of pavers that are sinking. The tree grates are a tripping hazard. We have the outdoor dining competing with the trees, and where people walk that you're kind of weaving, and sometimes you only have 1.5 feet to get around. We really don't have enough space for everything we want to see on this street right now. We've been using some imagery throughout to show, this is not only is this driven by what the community wants to see, it's also based on best practices and what we know is working in other places, and supported by research for, retail and downtown and civic infrastructure. So some other places from Ohio. And then this is an overview of the whole entire scope of the project. So just a reminder, we are looking at everything within the Columbus Avenue within that dotted line. So from Shade Mylander Plaza to Adams Street, and how all of those intersections work and how the streetscape works within those 3 blocks. So the 100 block, the 200 block, and the 300 block. The first 2 blocks, the 100 and 200 block, are that vibrant retail civic focused, where we are utilizing more streetscape. And then the 3rd block near Adams Street, we are allowing that to be a little bit more auto dominated, so we can have more parking there and just have a really nice tree lined streetscape there, which will add some parking and help this whole thing be parking neutral, which was something that we were driven towards with the community feedback of how important that is to everyone. So right now on the north side, on the east side, which is the top of this image on the 300 block, that's parallel today. We are changing that to angled in the design. So we'll zoom in a little bit, and you can see that the intersections are going to be tabled, and that just means that they'll be raised a little bit, so the pedestrian crossing is a lot safer and easier for people. You don't have to go down and then up. We're going to be reducing the crown of the street overall, so it'll be much more level when you're walking, and that is a huge accessibility increase. It's also a very subtle traffic calming improvement. So it's not going to feel like a speed bump, but it'll be a gentle rise and fall as you're driving, and it will slow traffic for the vehicles just to help the safety of the corridor. It's also a really anchoring placemaking opportunity to show you that you've arrived in a place and that it is a balanced and safe place for all users. You'll see that we're using some specialty paving around the Sandusky State Theater, so it's going to kind of have a grand plaza sort of feel to it. There's increased tree lawn, the, amenity zone where we have the lighting and the trees and the planters and some public seating. So we'll have enough soil in the ground for those trees to thrive and get tall as we'd like. We're going to have, it's almost more than double the space for outdoor dining right now, so it's 12 feet of outdoor dining and 8 feet of sidewalks, and you'll get a good visual of that as we get to the rendering. There's an opportunity in front of the parking garage, so we've had some questions of like, well, what are you gonna do in front of the parking garage? You don't need a outdoor dining there because there's no restaurant, it's a parking garage. What are you gonna do with that space? So we started examining the opportunity to do some sort of parklet, like kind of a small place where you could sit. Maybe there's buskers, there's somebody on the weekends out there playing a guitar with their, guitar case open, or, you go to Barra and get a taco and I go to Daly's and get a perch sandwich and we can meet up here and sit down and have dinner together and not have to go to the same place. So really an opportunity just for some gathering place, which we think will be really popular during lunchtimes, during events, and activate that space so it's not just concrete and really wide sidewalk there. Here's that block near the courthouse between Washington and Adams. We're just increasing the size of the tree lawn so those trees can do well, that we can actually save several of those established trees that are there because it lines up really nicely, and then adding the parking on the east side really increases that, and we get a nice balanced symmetrical streetscape here. We maintain our mid-block crossing into the park and across Columbus Avenue, which is a really nice pedestrian feature that exists today. So this is the update of that typical condition. So you can see the dimensions on the bottom, the 12 feet of dining and retail space, the 8-foot sidewalk, 9.5 feet public amenity zone, 9-foot parallel parking was actually a little wider than usual for parallel parking. We just want to make sure that people have space, and what that does is help the drive lanes be narrowed, so it helps control the design speed, but the overall space for vehicles, that 9, 11, 11, 9, adds up to the amount of space we need for when we do occasionally shut this street down for traffic. It can become a festival street, and that gives us a good space for 10 by 10 tents and room for people movement and room for emergency access down the center as needed during a festival. But the festival can be happening in the street, and then the retailers and restaurants and everyone that is occupants of the buildings still have their everyday typical amount of space. Right now, something we heard is that when we have festivals there, it's all pushed up against the retailers and they feel like nobody comes in, and so they will be able to spill out and be part of an event. We actually had a lot of people that really want it to be like this every day and not allow traffic vehicles on the street at all. We were trying to, what we ended up with is a balanced approach that really works for all users. We think that cars on Columbus Avenue are important, and parking on Columbus Avenue is important. We're hearing that loud and clear as well. So it's a balanced approach really from kind of both sides of like, shut this down completely, give us more parking. Let's talk about that kind of centered approach and make sure that we get what we've heard the most, which is outdoor dining, sidewalks, a really lovely experience, safety and accessibility.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Aaron, is there any discussion of closing any of the streets?
Not permanently. That was very popular in the 70s, and then it didn't work in a lot of places. I think it works in places like Barcelona, where you have so much foot traffic that you can afford to store, do parking far outside a district, where you have really vibrant public transportation, busing, really active people, a community that's used to walking, like in New York City, people are used to walking a mile to get to a place. And Sandusky, people really are still used to parking like very close to the front door of where they want to be. And so I don't think at this time we have enough foot traffic to close down streets permanently and that the businesses on those streets to do well. We need to have that balanced approach where it's accessible to all modes of transportation.
Yeah, like in Barcelona, that cars are the exception. Hardly anyone moves within the city in a car. It's just not even feasible. I mean, you're talking much of the city is medieval streets where you can touch both buildings if I can. You can't get a cart through the street without sharing the space with pedestrians.
Yeah. And who knows, people might over time abandon vehicles more and more. We know that millennials and Gen Z even more are waiting longer to get their driver's license. We know that we have the largest generation of humans and boomers that are going to stop driving eventually, probably, and that national surveys say, and I don't know if you all agree, but there's a lot of data out there that shows that people would like to walk places instead of relying on a vehicle. And maybe we will get that foot tracker someday. I think the biggest thing we do is not get in our own way. So we have that flexibility to change it if we'd like to. Maybe someday everybody will be taking, excuse me, it'll just be golf carts and scooters and boats, and that'll be Sandusky, and we can be flexible and respond to that, if and when we get there.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. These are some inspiration images of the, how to activate that kind of parklet space, and we went through a couple different options that are still in design right now for in front of the parking garage. So some of the conversation has been like screening that facade. Can we do something on the side of the garage, show it screens it, but then also advertise it with more signage so people really know it's there? We know that the parking garage is incredibly underutilized. It's almost always, 80% empty, and so we have a lot of parking. There's 300 spaces in that garage. There's a lot of parking there that people aren't using on a regular basis. So advertise that, activate the space, give it some interesting and exciting elements. So there's two different concepts of this, and I can share this PDF if you'd like, so you can zoom in on these. This one just uses landscape to create kind of a series of rooms. So there's some movable seating in some, there's some fixed benches in some, and this creates kind of like 4 little rooms there. And then the other one, which was most popular to everybody I've shown so far, uses a couple different elements. There's a shade structure with some oversized picnic tables, and then there's some swings, kind of like the swings on the pier.
Through the chair, if I could ask a question.
Yes.
Looking at this, it's good use of having places there. Would you have utilities there so that if you had like a food cart, that someone can pull up, hook up, and then you have both a dining and relax area at the same time?
Yeah, we're going to be looking at the utility options throughout the different planting zones on the 2 blocks especially. And I think to your point, we have had a couple conversations of a food cart could probably work really well here. We probably don't want a full-size food truck to be able to drive up on it, but someone that's got a push cart, it could be a really good place for it. And then sometimes I've seen in cities they do with busking spots, they'll do a place where a guitar amp can plug into. So we'll be looking at power for those places for sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then we have a little bit of a parking analysis, just so you know. We have 115 existing parking spaces today, and you can see in yellow where the specific accessible parking spaces are with the handicap sign on them, and then how those, you can see how those readjust. I think that they make more sense in the new design. They really were careful to look where those go. So the proposed in just those 3 blocks is 108 spaces, and there's more accessible parking spaces on more of the blocks than where there are today. There's a couple more in front of Columbus, or in front of City Hall, just to make sure we have them where we need them. And we're also looking at around the corner in close proximity as well to make sure we have those dedicated spaces as needed. And then we are looking, because we've heard a lot about parking, we know that parking is a concern. We're looking at opportunities to pick up a few spaces here and there. And we've already implemented, I believe it's been already implemented, but it's definitely drawn and planned and bid, the East Water Street lot there across from Shores and Islands. Josh redesigned that, Josh Snyder, our engineer, and that one added 8 spaces. He has drawn 2 scenarios for Washington Row, where when we resurface Washington Row, we can stripe those a little more efficiently and add 10 spaces overall there. And the traffic study showed the ability to remove the left turn lanes on Washington Street. We actually could turn that into a four-way stop if we wanted but we want to keep the light there. We think that's a part of the placemaking and the experience of getting into the city. But if we remove the left turn lanes, there is an opportunity to utilize Washington Street itself for parking, which could add 10 more spaces. So that gives us an overall count of 126 to 136 if we take those 10 from on Washington Street. So that adds more than we have today.
Through the chair, if I could.
Yes, Mark.
One additional question. When you're looking at between Washington Street and Adams Street, going to angled parking on the east side, will that reduce the width of the street at that point in time?
So the street lanes there'll be that 11-foot travel lane throughout this whole scope. And just to give you a sense of what that feels like, Shoreline Drive is like 9.5 to 10 feet. So Shoreline Drive is almost the legal minimum, and that's on purpose. It's supposed to make people feel like they have to drive 10 miles an hour to go safely, and that's the whole point, because that's how fast you want cars to be on Shoreline Drive, because it's a very pedestrian prioritized corridor. This, with 11-foot travel lane, it'll feel very comfortable and normal. They're like 12 to 14 today, depending on and 14 is like highway design speed, and you can go 50 down a 14-foot lane.
Too wide right now, inappropriately
Too
wide.
Yeah.
So there will be a reduction.
There will be a little bit of a narrowing, but it'll feel comfortable, not constrained.
Okay, thank you.
We also just looked, and this was kind of our call to have the consultants do a diagram for us, that we are looking at downtown parking as a system. There's more than 1,000 public parking spaces right now. So we know that parking is important. People being able to get here with a vehicle is important. We also want this to be a park once sort of place where most people can park one time and access multiple blocks of the downtown. And if we put Target on top of this or the mall on top of this, it's, people walk this far all the time to go to places. Also, in the conversation of accessibility, we've talked about parking management and how important it is to make sure that the spaces that are in front of businesses turn over quickly. So if we do our jobs right, there's not employees parking on those spaces for hours. There's not Jet Express passengers, parking on a Columbus Avenue and getting out with suitcases and coming back 2 days later. The on-street spaces should turn over at a regular basis, so there's always some on-street parking available. And if we're utilizing our garages and our lots efficiently, we have plenty of capacity to do that. Now we get to the pretty pictures. So this is a rendering for looking up the street from so you're kind of standing in the middle of the street from Shade Islander Plaza, looking south. You see the State Theater. There's the string lighting across the street, which has been super popular. People love that. And then you can see how that amenity zone with the paving feeds into that clear parking or clear sidewalk and the outdoor dining. This is a festival kind of look during the day, looking down from Market Street to the water. And you can see how much more space you have for walking on the sidewalk, and still plenty of space for a row or more of outdoor dining in front of the businesses.
Mr. Chairman, could I get you to just go back one? I just have a question to help my perspective. That where the fence is depicted in front of Daly's, is that where it is now, just from my sense of perspective?
This one is showing that Daly's would conform to what everybody else has, which is 12 feet. Daly's currently has 16 feet, but we have considered if that is a sticking point for them, and there's an uproar about that we will be able to accommodate 16 feet for them, and that you'll still get it will just be kind of a meandering sidewalk at that point. I think that there's good points and bad points to asking them to change their patio because it's been there so long at 16 feet.
Aaron, it might help to point out that the Daily area could go farther south because they're not using it. So they could wind up with something, same net outdoor area or more.
Yep, exactly. And that's how,
plan.
In this rendering, it shows their patio going further south to take advantage of their whole facade. And I think that would be the best outcome for the streetscape. I don't know if Daly's would argue that's the best outcome for them. So that's details we'll get into during the civil engineering process. And then we'll have to, so to that point, they have a permanent encroachment, and permanent just means you can leave it up all year round, but it's still city property. So we'll be redoing those encroachment agreements for everybody that has patios. We'll have to draw those boundaries again where everybody can have their outdoor patio.
Well, we have to keep in mind that this is, this is real estate that belongs to the people of Sandusky, so it's, everything we do, I think, needs to be, in the public interest. Obviously, we think this is.
Well, Dora would also impact how big Daly's patio has to be and stuff. It's not that it has to be a fenced-in corral anymore now that alcohol can go to the street. Right? You just have to have a Dora cup to go out there, like
That-
any
that
of the
does-
other places on
It does
Columbus.
raise another question, and that is will the fencing be standardized?
So luckily, fortunately, we got a grant from the Ohio Historic Preservation, the Council for Local Governments grant to update our design guidelines for the Historic Preservation District. And we are going to be embarking on a process to update our downtown design guidelines. That'll be coming up soon. I'll chat with you about it when we get there. And what I'd like to see, there's some places that I've seen already in the year that I've been here, a year and a half, that it's really missing. And rooftop decks is not even mentioned. I don't think anybody was doing that when they were written, 17 years ago. But that's really popular in the city and also recommended by the downtown plan. And then the fencing and like how to do that outdoor seating, I think are two big areas that we're going to want to see addressed in that design guideline update.
Well, and there's a difference between a standard for fencing that makes it all the same and the complete absence of standards.
Yeah, so our intention would be to allow, my understanding would be that it's consensus that would be that each patio can have its own personality, but it's within a set of design standards, so they would all look like.
And part of it is going to be, how you implement it, because the Landmark Commission did approve, and I thought it was supposed to be public policy that seems to have been ignored, is that there was a standard that basically said that I believe the limit was the alfresco dining area wouldn't be more than 60% of the sidewalk and the public open space, but the public open space would be not less than, I believe, 52 inches or something. I don't remember the exact number, but even if that meant less than 60%, so that it made ensured an accessible corridor, but for some reason that got forgotten pretty quickly.
5 feet's always the standard that we push for, and then
5 feet.
5 feet for open pedestrian
Right,
walkway.
60 inches would be better. We were more permissive, and it was definitely smaller than 60 inches.
And in practice, I think when the tables go out and they kind of move around, that it doesn't always, sometimes takes up a little more space than originally intended, I think. This is the view at City Hall, so looking from Washington Park North. You can see a little glimpse of that parklet using the shade structure on the left and some seating. Just getting a sense of what that tabled intersection looks like. I didn't mention, but the curb today is like 8.5 inches. We're going to a 4-inch curb, so it'll be much easier to step up and down from, which adds to the safety and accessibility, but still gives you a little bit of feedback as you're parking, so you know that you're not up on the sidewalk. So that'll help. And then I did mention reducing the crown overall, so it won't feel like you're walking up and downhill when you're on the street, crossing the street. So this is the condition today, and this is the proposed condition. So I'll flip that again so you can take a look. You can see how wide those drive lanes, if you look at where the cars are in the drive lanes, they're using almost half the space they have. And then this shores it up just to give everybody room to function on the corridor and really beautify it. So the overall outcomes is a stronger retail business and civic corridor, increased public space, expanded outdoor dining, improved safety, accessibility, and comfort, and updated water, storm, and utility infrastructure. So I also didn't mention that we're going to replace the 100-year-old storm line underneath the roadway, so there's good reason to dig it up, and every building will have the opportunity to replace their service lines coming in. Those will be drawn as part of the design process, which are very likely lead service lines, so it will be an overall safety increase for that as well. The next steps are, right now, where they're working on the Phase 2 design submission. That's what they call 60% design, and that really gets in the weeds of like, are there vaults underneath the the roadway, and what's every inch of this look like? There's storefronts that have a step up in, there's one that has a step down. Can we eliminate some of those accessibility issues so it's easier to get in and out of the buildings? Like, they're starting to get into the weeds on the details and the inches of this thing.
Well, it's easy to miss how steep the slope is in that block.
Yeah, they're really-
and how that does complicate things, sure.
And because we have bedrock so close, they're looking, instead of looking at digging it down, they're looking at if they can raise it up, because there's a number of places that you have to step up into, so if they can raise it up a little bit, overall that evens out the roadway, and it might eliminate those steps into the buildings, or some of them, and so those will have ADA upgrades, because you could roll a wheelchair right through instead of having to get up a step right now.
Well, I know of
So-
one place that the only reason it's a slope up is because it's got like 8 layers of floors, and the floor is probably like 6 inches thick.
Yeah.
Because they never, removed everything. They just kept adding layers of floor.
Yeah, old buildings. Oh, I know the courts need to start at 8:30, so we got just a few minutes. The construction, so we are looking at the design submission for Phase 3, that's construction drawings. We can bid the project in the summer and start construction in the fall. That's the earliest a timeline that we can possibly do. That would give us the grand opening spring of 2024, which we are letting the grand opening of the State Theater inform our timeline, because we don't want to tear up the street right after they open a $30 million State Theater redesign. So that, I will keep you updated on the timing of that. I do want to acknowledge that we have a guest today that I think that you'll be interested to hear from. He came in just for the community input portion, and the courts need to start at 8:30, which I wasn't really thinking about when I gave you this presentation, which is in 7 minutes.
Okay, go ahead. Then yours.
Yeah, this is the end of my presentation.
All right. So your special guest.
Oh, and did you all want to do any other, he's not about Columbus Avenue, I just met him this
okay.
morning, but is there any other things that you want to race through on old business, or just wait for Aaron Klein's update, because he's more fully informed on the rest of
I would move
it?
to table the additional updates until the next meeting.
Second.
All in favor of tabling this additional discussion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Good decision. All right. We're back to you.
Oh, community input? I
Yes.
believe. Do you want to step up to the podium and introduce yourself and just say hi and why you came today? Sure. Thanks.
Well, good morning. My name is Rich Reisner. I work for the Army Corps of Engineers out of Cleveland. I'm the Ohio Operations and Maintenance Manager. I'm also the Deputy Chief of Operations for our Buffalo District, which covers our lower Great Lakes. So my primary reason to come here is I just wanted to introduce myself. I believe want to kind of strengthen the engagement between the Army Corps of Engineers, City of Sandusky, Sandusky Harbor. The harbors and the federal channels are really my primary responsibility. I have a repair fleet of about 9 people, 9-person fleet that we work on the harbors. We want to continue initiatives, and we want to work on getting safety, water safety. We want signage. We have projects of dredge material management. And we want the Army Corps to be involved in your operations. We want your input involved in what we could do, and just continue to grow that engagement. And came here to introduce myself, and we put a face to a name. I know Mr. Klein has been my point of contact so far, but just brief conversations. I've only been in this position for about 5 months now, coming up on 6 months. And we've been working with Klein on dredge material management. I know you guys have some projects, Cedar Point Bay, or the Causeway, and just want to be plugged in We have plans on what to do with our material. You have plans on new lands, wetlands, and building areas up. So we want to be together on this.
Good to meet you.
Well, this is unprecedented. Thanks for being here. I mean,
Yes.
This kind of reach out, is from Corps of Engineers is really new to us. That's pretty cool. So how does one reach you?
So they've not given me business cards yet, but if you have a business card or if you have an email address, I can take it, write it down, and send you my contact information.
Right, okay.
And I'll have my phone number.
Oh, what's your email address?
Oh, it's richard.f.reisner, REISNER, at usace.army.mil.
That's F. Rising?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Aaron, could you email that out, the
Yes.
contact information out to
Yep.
us?
that'd
I
be
can do
great.
that.
Please, and thank you.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate that.
I reiterate Mike's pleasure at having someone from the Corps of Engineers actually show up in person. I know I've been involved with a number of marina projects over the last 30 years, like with the Sandusky Yacht Club and obviously the city. And sometimes the Army Corps seems to be the most difficult one to get involved. And so it's great to have the reach out. Appreciate that.
Well, in particular, that they're in touch with our staff, and and it's not a criticism. It's a tough job, and their resources are spread pretty thin, and they got a lot of responsibility. So, I mean, you can't blame any person. It's just.
I'm just saying, it's
I'm
great
just
to
saying
have
thank you
the
for
reach
showing
out.
up.
Yeah.
The only thing that would shock me more would be the railroad showing up.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yes, Bill.
Just quick
They're still
question,
mad at
how do you
They're
feel
still mad at
the
us.
cells are working
Mad at everybody.
for the dredgings currently?
Currently, they seem to be working well. 5 years from now, that's where gets a little more complex.
Yeah.
You know, here in Sandusky Bay, along the Federal Channel, we dredge out about 125, 135 cubic yards a year. And once we get into 4 or 5, 6 years down the road, that's where we need to really work with the city on where to put this. So we want to put together internally a 20-year plan. So 5 years really what's required by the state. That's where the Congress wants to see a 5-year plan. But internally, we want a 20-year plan. So part of my effort is to help that, be our Buffalo presence, because our office is in Buffalo. People don't get here often. It's a 4-hour drive to Sandusky. For me, I live in the Cleveland area. It's a 45-minute drive for me. So I want to be your conduit into the Army Corps, as well as the Army Corps' conduit into the city.
I was going to say a 4-hour drive, you're pushing it.
I know we're up against the time
8:29.
line, but
At a time.
8:29.
All right.
And we're.
Lions Park, you're familiar with it? Is there any, one of those frustrating things about getting a hold of the Army Corps is looking for guidance and professional assistance and beach accretion and so forth around Lions Park. Is that on anybody's planning horizon at this point in time? Is that in anybody's discussion?
So I don't know, but I can find out.
That's trying to plan a thought.
Mr. Chair, move to adjourn.
Second.
Second, I think we are being forced to